All right, great. So we are recording this for future anyone else who needs this information later and can't join us live. Anyway, welcome to the FEA Advisor webinar for the Winter Spring 2027 application cycle. My name is Joelle Leinbach. I'm the program manager. This is my colleague Madison. We'll do more full introductions in just a minute, but to kick us off, we'd love to know who is here. So if you want to let us know in the chat, sort of where you're coming from, what your role is, if there's any questions off the bat that you have, we'll probably be answering them. We just like to know a little bit who's joining us today. We know it can kind of run the gamut from study abroad offices to financial aid. So it helps us to know a little bit of who's here. Participation is optional, but it does help us. Yep, study abroad office working on financial aid and scholarship advising. Yep, there's often a lot of overlap in these offices we find. Yep, fellowship advisor. For those of you just joining, we are asking folks to pop in the chat where you're coming from, what your role is, just to kind of get a sense of who's in the room today and what sorts of questions might be most relevant for you. Since we know students get advising from lots of different kinds of advisors and university folks, and not university folks potentially on their scholarship applications. Office of Fellowships. It seems like we got a pretty wide geographic spread. That's always nice to see. All right. So if you haven't had a chance to put anything in the chat, feel free to do so, but we'll go ahead and move on. Um, as I said, my name is Joelle Leinbach. I am the program manager with Fund for Education Abroad. So I have been with FEA for, I think, about 2.5, 3 years as staff, but I have been involved as a volunteer for quite a long time, and I actually started as an intern about 6 years ago. So have been a part of the FEA world for quite a long time, know the scholarship very, very well. Always happy to answer any of your questions either here or over email later. And I will kick it over to Madison.
Hi, everyone. My name is Madison Pastrick. I am FEA's new fundraising manager. New as in this is my third week. So very excited to be here with you all. This is my first webinar on this side of things. However, I actually came from Texas Christian University. I was an advisor in their study abroad office, like many of you are coming to us now. And I'm based here in Fort Worth, Texas. And yeah, like I said, third week at FEA. So really excited to be here and to work with you all and your support for the scholarship. So we appreciate it.
Yes, we are very happy to have Madison joining our team. I did forget to say I am based over in Washington State. And then our third team member is Angie Schaefer. She is our executive director. She is off on a very well-deserved vacation right now. And we're happy to let her have that time. And that's it. The three of us are the entire team of FEA. So anytime you email us, you're going to get one of us, probably me. But it is pretty much we're a very small but mighty team, is what we like to say. Um, all right, Madison, I'll let you take it away.
All right, wonderful. So yeah, just a little bit about us. Fund for Education Abroad, also commonly referred to as FEA. We are a scholarship organization that we provide scholarships and ongoing support to students with financial need who face barriers to participate in education abroad. So you all know the incredible work that you're doing working with these students that have just more barriers in having these life-changing opportunities. We're just another resource for them through both the scholarship program and a couple advising and webinars that we offer for students as well. All right, so a little bit more about us. So we are a 501c3 certified nonprofit organization founded in 2010. So we are celebrating our Sweet 16 this year. I'll talk a little bit more about our upcoming gala that's hosted at the end of the year in November. really diving into that Sweet 16 theme, 16 years of raising lots of funds for scholarships. So we've given out more than $5 million in scholarships to over 1,500 students. The minimum scholarship that students are applying for through this organization is going to be $1,000, and a semester scholarship is typically going to be about 5,000. So we do look at the term length in which the students are studying abroad. There's a lot of factors that go into how much exactly the student is given, but just so you understand that range that students are applying for, it's between 1,000 and 5,000. We've received the National Scholarship Providers Association Scholarship Provider of the Year Award in 2019, GoAbroad.com's Innovation and Diversity Award in 2020, and in 2023, the Diversity Abroad Organizational Champion EDIIE Award. All right, so some important things to consider, especially when advising with students. Eligibility requirements. So students do have to be 18 years of age or older. They have to be a US citizen, a permanent resident, or a DACA recipient. They have to be enrolled as an undergraduate at a US institution of higher education at the time of their application. They have to be also receiving credit. So as we all know, there are some international education opportunities where they're not receiving credit. That is an important distinction to consider here for their application. So as long as they're getting that credit for their home institution during their experience abroad, they have to be studying abroad for at least 14 days. This is another really important distinction. We get a lot of questions from students about this. Because of the number of applications that we receive, we do have to be pretty strict on this deadline. I know there are some situations where students might not know the length of their program. Joelle can talk a little bit more about that later on in the presentation, but 14 days is what you can communicate with students. So a lot of summer faculty-led programs, semester programs, obviously year-long programs, but spring break programs, kind of J-term programs typically wouldn't apply for this scholarship. Students are not to have studied abroad since graduating high school. This is another one we get a lot of questions on. What does it mean to study abroad? I know there's a lot of different definitions out there, and students will sometimes have some really interesting ways of phrasing their previous study abroad experiences. But generally, I expect you all understand what we mean. If they've done a faculty-led program, if they've done a semester abroad program, already during their college career, they would not be eligible for this scholarship. And that's just because we want to focus on students who have never had the opportunity of studying abroad before first. And like I said, we receive a lot of applications with students that don't have previous study abroad experience. And then the last one is demonstrating financial need. And I think on the next slide, we might talk a little bit more about what exactly that means. Okay, perfect. So we, as an organization, FEA, determine financial need based on information from the student's most recent FAFSA. The student is eligible for an FEA scholarship if any of the following criteria here apply. So their student aid index, the SAI, is below 20,000. If they're eligible and receiving Pell Grants, and if they've taken out any amount of loans for the current academic year. So Joel, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we discussed that this is something that we've focused a little bit more on if the students are taking loans out. So yeah, Joel, I don't know if you wanted to say anything else about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about the breakdown of scoring a little later, but we have put more points towards loans this cycle than in the past, partially because we really do want to make sure that some of those students who might sort of be falling through the cracks otherwise because they don't have a super low SAI, or they're not Pell Grant eligible, but they are taking out boatloads of loans. We want to make sure we're still kind of capturing them and giving them a fair shot at the scholarship. So thank you for pointing that out, Madison. That is an important change this year that might make a difference in scoring.
Great. And then for program specifics, what about the destination or the program length? Like we had said, 2 weeks minimum, so 14 days, and we do have to be pretty strict on the 14 days limit. So I know a lot of programs are 10 days, 11 days that would not be they would not be eligible if that's the case. So 2 weeks in length. And generally, we'll grant scholarships for students going anywhere. We're really proud to have a very diverse set of programs and locations that our students are going out to. So we don't limit based on location. We're not looking at capping certain numbers of locations and so forth. So that's open to students going anywhere outside of the US.
Yeah, thanks, Madison. The only other thing that I'll chime in there about the eligibility criteria and especially that 2 weeks in length. Those of you who have sort of been following FEA for a while know that our length requirement has changed over the years. It used to be way back we had, I believe it was a 4 week length requirement. We got rid of that quite some time ago. For a while, we had no length requirement. What we were finding with that was that we were so overwhelmed with short-term applications that it actually seriously impacted our awarding. We were giving out more scholarships, but significantly less dollar amounts, just because of the way that that all works. And then we didn't really have funding left over in certain pots for scholar or full semester students in a way that wasn't really working out in anyone's favor. So we do get a lot of questions about that 2 week length requirement, but that's part of the reasoning why we have that there. It's not that we don't like short-term programs. It was causing a lot of challenges administratively and was sort of tipping things in a way that was not beneficial for students going on longer programs in a way that really wasn't that fair. The other context that I'll add for our eligibility requirements, just broadly speaking, is our award rate is not very high. We are a fully philanthropic organization. All of our funding comes from donations and different kinds of partnerships that we have there. We don't have just this massive boatload of money to hand out. Our usual award rate is about 3 to 4% of applicants. That's been the last few cycles. So we are really, really strict on the eligibility criteria, not because we want to be, but because even if we allowed exceptions, the chances of those students getting a scholarship is so slim that it really just wouldn't be worth their time or ours. As you have seen, we are a very small team, and so we do sort of have to take some steps to keep that all manageable for us. So that's part of why all of those things exist. If you have questions about the eligibility requirements, always feel free to reach out. We know they get a little finicky sometimes, and not all students' programs fit nicely within all of the different sort of categories that we set. We know that's just the reality of working and study abroad, especially these days. There's such a wide variety of programs, which is amazing to see, but does make some of these things a little bit tricky. So, any questions about any of that, feel free to reach out to us or ask questions at the end of the webinar. We'll be around.
Yeah, so then just real quick about how we assess the applications. The students are required to write 2 essays. We'll talk a little bit more about what those essay prompts look like. I do want to just point out now that we're not looking for like 10-page papers. There is a word limit on both of the essays. I believe one is 300 words and the other is 600 words. So we're really looking for content over the amount that students are writing. We want to really get to know who they are in those essays. And so, Joa will talk a lot more in detail about what those prompts look like and how you can kind of assist students in writing those essays and preparing for that side of things. We do look at financial need, as we'd mentioned, that criteria is written out there. And then personal factors. So we look at whether students are first generation college students, community college status. If you're working at a community college or if you know students that are in community college systems, we look at that as well. Prior experience abroad, like we said, we're going to favor students, and it is one of our eligibility requirements that they haven't studied abroad before. Outside of studying abroad in college, we do look at if they have traveled internationally in high school, whether it's a family trip, if they studied abroad independently, taking a gap year, things like that. We do take that into consideration. But studying abroad in college is the only thing that would have made them not eligible for the scholarship. And then program length. So we've talked about the 14-day requirement. We're also looking at program length for the amount that the student is awarded. We do award a little bit differently based on semester versus short-term programs, as you all know. There just would be more financial need for a student that's going to be abroad for an entire academic year versus a 2 week program. So all of that is taken into consideration when the application is assessed, both for students being eligible and then also the award amount that the student receives.
Great. Yes. For that program length, I will say that is not weighted so strongly that that only semester students get scholarships. We still see many, 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 in fact, most of our scholarships that we give out, especially for the summer fall cycle, are short-term sort of summer programs and not full semester. So it's definitely not disqualifying in any way if a student is going on a shorter program as long as they meet that 14-day minimum. And gap years, just as a quick note, also do count towards prior study abroad. It's basically before high school graduation doesn't count. Anything after that does. I know that gets a little wonky sometimes, but just as a note there. Okay, we'll talk about the application. Those of you who have been following us for a while know that we have sort of hopped around between different application platforms. Currently, we are on one called Scholarship Manager. It is new as of last year. We are thus far very happy with it. It is extremely user-friendly. And there's a couple of tech things that come up sometimes. Students can always email us about that, but that's been true for every platform we've ever been on. We've got a number of application sections. New with this platform is an eligibility quiz. So before students can even access the full application, they will fill out a bunch of questions, sort of answering those eligibility questions, and then the application will only become available to them if they are eligible based on that quiz. So that's, we think, super helpful for students. That's a nice first step. If you're ever kind of not sure if a student is eligible, you can always have them open up an account and just sort of fill that out to see. Beyond that, once they're into the actual application, we need basic information, name, contact information. We'll ask them questions about their academics, where they're going to school, major, minor, all of that when they're graduating. We'll ask, of course, for information about their study abroad program, where they're going, what their program provider is, what are the dates of their program, and just sort of a few other details to help us sort of get a sense of what does this program look like for them. A few more questions about you. That's where we ask those kind of first gen questions, not community college, that's an academic, but some of these other sorts of questions that are helpful for us in getting a broader picture of the student. Financial aid, which we'll talk about quite a bit in the next few slides, essay questions, and then just a verification at the end that everything is correct and they haven't lied to us. We do also have some upload fields for an unofficial transcript that is at this point not scored, but we do use it just to confirm enrollment. It does not have to be an official transcript. They don't have to go through lots of hoops to get us a very formal thing. We just like unofficial is fine. We get lots of questions about that. And then financial documentation, which, as I mentioned, we will talk about at length. So we'll talk about some of the changes that we've made to the application since our last cycle. The last few years have seen many things changing in the world, and that has also impacted our application pretty significantly. Changes to the FAFSA, changes with AI and how students are using that in essays. I am happy to report that this time around, the changes are not quite as extensive as they have been the last few cycles, if you've been following us for a while. But there are some pretty significant impacts that we hope will make everyone's life a little bit easier. So to start off, this is our scoring matrix from our last cycle. You can see that things are divided into roughly thirds, but essays are sort of the biggest factor there at 36%, and then financial need and personal factors sort of split up between them. That has changed somewhat significantly. You can see that financial need is now the highest at 38%. That is a little less because we super wanted financial need to count for much more, so much as because we added more things to financial need that we can take into account there. So as I mentioned earlier, we have increased the weighting for loans just to make sure that we're giving those high loan students a fair shot at getting the scholarship, which I think is a change that will be a good one. It's our first cycle doing it, so we'll kind of see how it works out, but we're feeling good about it. And the other big change here is we now include a score for additional circumstances. So it used to be in the past that in the application in the financial aid section, we would basically give students a free response box of tell us anything else about your finances that's not represented in the numbers that you're presenting us from FAFSA, from the SAI and the Pell and their loans. And students wrote all kinds of things there. And it was always really interesting and helpful to kind of see what's going on in students' lives. But there was a challenge in that we didn't have a good way to, there wasn't really a mechanic to include that in the scoring itself. And that we didn't like. And so we have now changed it so that every single student is asked a question and given a list of specific circumstances that they can choose. And so we kind of looked at the most common situations that we were seeing students report with that kind of thing. It was very often siblings in college that are no longer accounted for in the FAFSA. It's things like if they're completely financially independent from their family, but are still counted as a dependent, which obviously has a pretty significant impact on finances. It's things like if they are supporting their family financially, where not all of their income goes just to them and their study abroad. It just sort of these most common situations that we saw, we were asking every single student about all of those so that we can capture a little bit more consistently what that is looking like and also add in a mechanism for giving them some points for that as well. So again, this is also our first time doing this, so I imagine we'll see some tweaks in the future. But I do think overall this is a really important change that we're making, just to make sure we're really kind of as holistically as possible capturing what everyone's situation looks like, since we know that finances are much more complicated than just what shows up in the FAFSA. But that's part of why that financial need weighting looks so much heavier this time, is because we just needed to add some points in there to add all that in there. So it's kind of a math question when it comes down to it. But this is where that stands right now. The biggest change that we've made, in addition to that loan weighting and adding that additional circumstances, is the documentation for financial need. Those of you who have worked with FEA for a long time are probably familiar with our FEA financial aid form. I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that you probably hate FEA's financial aid form. And I am very happy to say that we no longer have that. We have removed that requirement. So fireworks and celebration and confetti all around. No one liked that form. We didn't like that form. Advisors didn't like that form. Students didn't like that form. I see some hoorays in in the chat with some emojis. Yes, we all feel that way. So we have removed that form entirely. Students no longer have to complete an extra form, take it to their financial aid office, have an advisor sit down with them, fill out a bunch of information, and then re-upload that and go through lots of steps that involve other people and overwhelming offices. We're done with that. What we are asking for instead from students are hopefully documents they already have available that are relatively easy for them to find. We are asking them to submit a financial aid award letter if they have one from their university that shows basically all the same information, the aid that they're getting. Ideally, it will have their SAI and any Pell Grants if they're Pell eligible. Or if they don't have that or can't find it, we'll also take the FAFSA submission summary, again, looking for that SAI number and Pell eligibility there. So those are the main documents that we are looking for. I am finding just anecdotally in what we're seeing submitted so far, most students are going for the FAFSA submission summary, which is totally fine. But those financial aid award letters do often have a little bit more information. So if you're working with students, I would encourage you to encourage them to lean towards that financial aid award letter, but it's not really a huge deal either way. We'll take both. The most important thing for that document is that it does have that SAI and Pell amount, if applicable. The other document that we are asking for is if a student has accepted loans, not just been offered, but actually accepted those loans for the year, that they also provide a loan summary showing those accepted loans. We have been getting some questions in our inbox about this, as it seems like some students don't necessarily have access to that, or it hasn't been released yet. So if you're working with a student who has accepted loans, but they can't get a loan summary or can't find it, or their loan provider makes it super hard to find, which I would believe, you're totally fine to submit anything that shows those accepted loans. So that might be that financial aid award letter they can just upload a second time, might be some other type of document that the financial aid office provides them, just whatever can sort of show us the amount of those accepted loans for the year is really all we need for that, if it's not the actual loan summary itself. We are not requiring any kind of documentation for additional circumstances. That's totally on our system. But these are all of our sort of different criteria there that students can select there as applicable to them. That significant job loss, just to clarify, is job loss since submitting the FAFSA, since that can change numbers considerably, but of course wouldn't be taken into account if it happened afterwards. Siblings in college is a very, very common one. Significant medical debt, I believe on the application itself, we put 10,000 or over, and that's not just for the student, that's also just their whole family unit. part or full-time work alongside classes, sort of all of those additional circumstances. If you are working with a student who has another additional circumstance that is a little wonky, you're welcome to reach out to us and let us know, mostly for future, so we sort of know about other circumstances that we should put in there. Since we have sort of codified this and standardized it, we no longer have the free response. So we're no longer going to be able to hear from students themselves unless they write in their essays about something, any other kind of extenuating situations that we might want to know about or add to that list. So if you're working with any students and know of any other sort of common situations that we've missed here, please let us know so we can take that into account for a future application cycle. All right, enough about finances. Let's talk essays. Our essay prompts have not changed since our last cycle. Those are exactly the same for students. However, if you are coming back to us after some time away as an advisor, you will notice that these prompts are different than they used to be from a few years ago. We've kind of been tweaking them over the last few years, especially with just the increase of AI and the impact that that has had on how and what students write. So as it stands right now, our first essay for students has a 300 word maximum. Why have you chosen your intended study abroad program? Describe any unique elements of your program that influenced your choice and share what you hope will be most empowering to you about your experience. We really want to know about students' programs here and their reasoning for choosing it. So if you're advising students, best way to kind of get them easy points is make sure they tell us where they're going and what their program is. That is something that students sometimes will miss. They'll just say, man, I'm excited to go abroad, but we have no idea where, just from the essay alone. And that's kind of an important factor for us just to know about, is where they're going, what they're doing there. And then certainly anything that makes this program important to them in particular. Specificity is really going to be key for both of these essays, specificity and detail. Those are the things that our rubric is really kind of leveraged to reward. This second essay is extremely open-ended. What should we know about you that is not conveyed elsewhere in your application? Please be specific. This is your opportunity to tell us why you are a deserving candidate and what makes you different from other applicants. Students have a little bit more room here, and they truly can write just about anything they want. What we're looking for here is new information that's not elsewhere in their application, and that ideally provides just a little bit more context around sort of their life, maybe their study abroad choice, kind of their trajectory. We've left it open-ended for a couple of reasons. One is because we know that students all have a unique path and we want to leave them room to tell us what that is for them in particular. We don't want to sort of assume that they have certain goals or are coming from any particular kind of background. We really want to make sure that that is open-ended enough to allow them to tell us what their story is. The other reason is because AI has a much harder time with open-ended questions. And we would like to make sure that students are really putting in their own sort of thoughts, and putting in information about themselves, really. What we don't want to have is a whole bunch of essays that are completely written by AI that the students didn't even read themselves. We did see that a number of cycles ago, and it was not a fun time as a reviewer. It was not great for students. Scores generally were quite low. Since then, students have definitely figured out how to use AI in more beneficial ways, so we're not as worried about that. But we do still sort of approach these essays with have they told us something about themselves actually in mind, rather than just a whole bunch of general information about study abroad is great. Please give me a scholarship, which is what AI likes to write. We do have an official stance on AI. This is something that appears on the essay page of the application itself, so students do see this. We read your essays to get a better understanding of who you are and hear your authentic. You will tell your own story better than AI can. While FEA does not prohibit the use of AI technologies for the purpose of revision and proofreading, applicants should use their own thoughts for idea generation and essay writing. We really do mean this. We do not disqualify anyone for using AI, or if we suspect that they've used AI. We don't honestly care a whole lot whether they do or not, but we do care about whether they're telling their story well, whether they use it or not. And we do find that students do genuinely know their own life and their own story and their own motivations better than AI possibly could. So That's sort of the messaging that we try to give to students. If you are working with students on this, one thing I would stress to them is using AI does tend to make essays worse. Certainly not across the board. But as a reviewer, having read many, many, many essays, you can kind of tell. And you can also kind of tell sometimes when AI has removed parts of their personality that would have served them really well to keep in there. So if students are going to use AI, we would really stress that they be mindful about how they're using it and really keep it to kind of a minimum. We, on the reviewing side, have removed the quality of writing criteria and score, so students truly don't need to worry about grammar and punctuation very much. Of course, they will. We like reading an essay that has good grammar and punctuation, but they're not going to lose points if it's not grammatically perfect. So it is completely fine for them to use AI, but I have seen enough instances where students kind of shoot themselves in the foot by relying too heavily on AI when they would have done a better job without it, that I don't want to encourage it, but they're certainly allowed, is kind of where we've landed on that. Um, with all of that said, we do have one question on the application after the essays where we ask students to kind of self-disclose whether and how they used AI. This is 100% for my own information to use while looking at the application to figure out what changes we might need to make. This is not looked at any point in review. It is not scored. It has no impact on decisions whatsoever. Truly, the only person who ever sees this is me. And just for context, for the most recent summer fall application that closed in February, I started looking at this data yesterday. And we did our awarding in April. So like it's so far divorced from the application and review itself that students truly can be honest here. There is no penalty if a student says in here that they used AI to write their entire essay and didn't even read it themselves. They can say that and it will have no impact on their application whatsoever. That said, we know lots of students don't necessarily feel comfortable disclosing that, and that's okay too. We totally expect that. But if you're working with students and they express sort of anxiety over this question, whether they'll be penalized if they mention that they've used AI, they will not be. It truly does not matter. It is just helpful for me to kind of keep my finger on the pulse of how are students using it? How is this working? What do we need to consider as we're revamping our application for next time? That is the sole purpose of this question. So rest assured that students can be as honest as they want to be on this question. Okay, some other just sort of general information about our scholarships as students are applying. We only have one application. There's one application that students fill out. They do not need to fill out multiple applications, but we do have many different scholarships and a few different types of scholarships as well. We've got our general scholarships, which are open to anybody who meets our general eligibility criteria. We've got some named and dedicated scholarships. Those are usually funded by specific donors or groups or organizations who have sort of come together to create an organ or a scholarship for a specific purpose. Sometimes those are general and open to everyone. Sometimes they have some restrictions. For example, we have some that are specific to students going to Denmark. We have one for students going to the UK, and that's just sort of donor preference there. Um, but many of them are also general. And then we also have our Access Partner scholarships, and those are for students who are attending programs with our Access Partners, who are essentially program providers in the field. I've got a slide and a couple of slides about exactly sort of who that is in the field, but if a student is going through a program provider, that might be one of our Access Partners, and then they're considered for those scholarships as well. We do all of the sort of eligibility sorting in the background for all of this, so students do not need to worry about it at all. This is stuff that we sort of take on our end. And any student who applies is going to be considered for every single one of our scholarships that they qualify for, based on some of those different restrictions in there. And everyone who applies, as long as they meet the eligibility requirements, is eligible for those general scholarships and any of our general named scholarships. One quick note for those access partner programs, it says we have cash scholarships or waivers. That is technically true, but waivers are pretty few and far between. The only universities right now that are offering waivers are University of Sydney in Australia, and then I believe there's three institutions in Ireland who offer those. Cork and Limerick, I believe, are two of them. But they're not as common. Certainly, most students are going to get cash scholarships, and waivers are really kind of a tuition deduction or a accommodation deduction on their bill. So they work a little bit differently. Just something to be aware of, but it comes up relatively infrequently. Some examples of our named scholarships here. For example, we've got our Breakout Scholarship, that is funding set aside specifically for current or former community college students. That Cyril Taylor Memorial Scholarship I mentioned is for students going to the UK. The Rawari Scholarship for students going to Denmark. And then Seven Corners Scholarship is a more recent one that we've added from Seven Corners Travel Insurance. That is a completely general scholarship, so that is open to everybody, but it is funded by Seven Corners. And then this is our current list of access partners. If you're working in the field of international ed, you're probably very familiar with a lot of these. The one thing I will say about CEA Kappa, we know they've been going through some mergers lately. The CEA Kappa Access Partner Scholarship is available to students going on any CEA Kappa program. So that includes right now CEA Kappa itself, that includes CIS Abroad, that includes Barcelona SAE, and that includes, I believe, Atlantis is the other one. The other one that we see come up sometimes is Lex Fellowship, but those are not usually for credit, so would not actually be eligible in the vast majority of cases, at least. So if you have questions about sort of what that eligibility looks like, feel free to reach out. We know it gets a little bit complicated with mergers, and that will probably change over time as well, but that's where it stands right now. All right, and then this is the timeline that we are looking at. Right now, the open application is for the winter spring 2027 period abroad. So that is basically Jan term programs, as long as it's over 2 weeks. So any of those month-long Jan term programs should qualify. That includes possibly spring break. It kind of depends on exactly when the timing starts. Sometimes spring break can also qualify for summer and Maymester. Students can also usually apply for either our winter, spring, or our summer fall cycle, but they'll know much sooner if they do the winter, spring cycle. Um, and then, of course, long-term sort of full semester programs in the spring would qualify for this one as well. That application deadline is September 16th at 12 p.m. That is noon, not midnight. Eastern time. So if you're not in Eastern time, make sure that students are aware that the deadline is in Eastern time. And if they try to apply at noon their time on the day of the deadline, they might have missed it. We do have to be very, very strict about this deadline. So I just want to make sure that we're communicating as clearly as possible exactly when that is. So especially if you're working with students, make sure they are aware that it's 12 p.m. noon, not midnight in the Eastern time zone. And then beyond that, once the application closes, our review starts. There's a lot of review that kind of happens on the back end, just with FEA staff. All of that financial information does not get any further than just staff. We don't share that with our general reviewers. And then our general review period will be happening September 24th through October 9th. We're estimating we'll be interviewing our finalists roughly October 21st through 28th. That might shift a little bit. There's a lot of conferences happening around that time, as you may be aware. And so sometimes that moves around a little bit. And then we're aiming to have all decisions out in November. Just a couple of notes on sort of our notification process. We do not notify home institutions as a standard practice. We really only communicate with students about that and about their scholarship. Really, the only exception to that is those waiver awards, and sometimes we or the host institution that they're working with might be in touch with your offices just to sort of figure out the billing and make sure that's all squared away. That is what the review timeline looks like. I mentioned this in part because we would love to have you review with us. One of the best ways to really get to know the application itself and really dive deep into what it is that we're looking for and figure out how to help students the best is through reviewing. And of course, it also helps us out as well. We are a team of three. We cannot review over 3,000 applications ourselves, at least not in a fair and reasonable way. So we really do rely on our reviewers to get that done. Plus, I think it's a lot of fun, just as a little plug. I really enjoy reading student essays. Many advisors we find do as well. It really kind of gets you a good sense into sort of what's up right now with students and what they're looking for and where they're looking to go and what are they prioritizing. It's something I have always enjoyed. I actually don't get to review essays quite as much now that I'm staff, and sometimes that makes me sad. So here's a few different ways to get involved. I have talked a lot about reviewing. Right in here, we do have a form you can fill out if you've never reviewed with us before on our website on the volunteers page. It is not too late to sign up, but I would recommend signing up soon because our training is starting next week. Is that true, Madison, or is it the week after?
Might be the week after.
It might be the week after. Anyway, it is coming up soon, and you want to get signed up for that quickly so you can get that on your calendar. If you have reviewed with us before and want to join us again, you should have an email in your inbox. If you haven't seen it, feel free to reach out to me. And then I'll pass it over to Madison to talk about other ways to get involved.
Yeah, so I just wanted to briefly mention our gala and what we're calling our FEA Sweet 16 like birthday bash this year. So it's going to be hosted on November 19th in DC, which is where we're headquartered. It's a really wonderful event if you're familiar with it. We host this every single year. And there are so many ways to get involved. This is a really exciting thing to talk about with all of you because we know that from the university side of things are some of our greatest advocates and supporters. And as you've seen, we're a very small staff, and FEA's impact really is only as big as our network, and that includes all of you. So if there are any ways that you'd like to get involved, please let us know. I'm going to include a link to the event here in the chat. So just some suggestions. Obviously, if you want to attend, early bird tickets are available right now. So if you're interested in attending, I do recommend getting those tickets before September 1st. Lots of sponsorship opportunities as well. If your institution or if another organization that you're a part of is interested in sponsoring FEA, those do also include tickets to the event. So might be a nice win-win for you all as well. If you're not so familiar with the gala itself, it's beyond just being a really wonderful time for international education professionals to get together. It's a really wonderful networking opportunity. So if that can be part of your pitch to your institution and getting you a ticket and maybe offering a sponsorship, that would be really wonderful. We're also always interested in in-kind donations. Like I said, we are based in DC, but we have auction items and silent auction items all over the US because people really do travel for this event. So if there's anything that you might be able to provide as an in-kind donation, sponsorship, attending yourselves, please take a look at the page and just reach out to us as well. It's, like I said, a really fun event and I think a really wonderful way to get involved with the FEA community.
Yes, the gala is always a great time. You also get to dress up fancy. It's very fun, especially this year with sort of the birthday bash theme. I think people will probably step it up even more. So if you're into that, it's going to be a good time. I'm pretty excited about that. I'll also mention just a couple other sort of events that we usually do in December after the gala. We typically have FEA Day, which is kind of a day of webinars. We'll usually do our advisor webinar just like this one, but for the next cycle. So you'll get to know any of the updates that we're making in the future. We'll sometimes do an applicant webinar as well. And then we'll usually put together some kind of panel discussion or other kind of fun event for the field. I don't believe we have a date for that set yet either, but that is usually in the first couple weeks of December. So just some other stuff to kind of keep up on. We don't typically do a lot of individual info sessions for institutions. We wish we could, but when there's only three of us, we're spread a little too thin for that most of the time. But we do have flyers available on our website that you're welcome to print out. And we're always available by email if you have specific questions or want to chat a little bit more about the application or things that might be specific to your students. That, I believe, is everything we have. Any questions? You're welcome to pop things in the chat or take yourself off mute. And if you don't have any questions, you are welcome to head out. We know schedules
Hey,
are big. Hey there.
sorry, I had a question. I'm Keegan Scott from the University of Rhode Island, the director of the Office of Fellowships. And I just want to make sure that indeed FEA, when it refers to study abroad, that includes all of the United States and US territories.
Yes, that is a little bit of a complicated one. We actually kind of kick the can over to the study abroad offices to determine whether that counts. So if your office counts US territories in terms of going there, if your office counts US territories as study abroad versus study away, then that counts for us. Students from territories are certainly eligible and welcome to apply, just regardless.
Great, thank you.
Mhm. Any other questions? All right. If not, we can go ahead and wrap up a little early. I'll probably hang out for another couple minutes, so there might be some stuff in the chat. Great. Thank you all for joining. I'll go ahead and stop the recording.